What's a fact that's real, but sounds completely fake? Huge tumor 9642 said. When baby horses are in the womb, their hooves are soft and have tentacles on them to prevent them harming the mother. They look really weird but drop off in 30 minutes. Rikadikatavali said. Mantis shrimp strike their prey so quickly, with speed up to 51 miles per hour and acceleration up to 10,400 g, that it generates cavitation bubbles between their claw and the surface of the prey. The prey is hit twice, first by the claw at a force of 1,500 newtons, and second by the collapse of the cavitation bubbles, which produces a shock wave strong enough to stun or kill much larger prey than the shrimp itself. They can crack aquarium glass and split open a human thumb. Edit, accuracy. Rikadikatavali said. I did a little more reading and here are some other fun facts. Some species of mantis shrimp are rainbow-colored and mind-bogglingly beautiful. Humans have 3 types of color-receptive cone cells in our eyes that allow us to see all the colors we do. Mantis shrimps have 16 types of color-receptive cone cells and are able to see both UV and polarized light. The force of the collapsing cavitation bubbles produces temperatures of several thousand kelvins and also emits tiny bursts of light called sonoluminescence. Finally, here is a video of an unfortunate dude getting punched in the foot by a piss-off mantis shrimp. https://m.youtube.com/watch?vicwasabcozfzmxu. Nasja said. I had half a kidney removed due to kidney stones, at the ripe old age of 24, and that fucker bled so much, I had to have a few blood transfusions. Drink more water, people. And don't consume cheap protein powder that's full of shit. Edit. Apologies guys, I've been well busy. I don't think the website I bought my protein from even exists anymore. UK based if that helps, but it was cheap as chips. Firelockney said. Barings Bank, one of the largest banks in Britain, provided the loans to the US to buy the Louisiana Purchase. This led to Napoleon giving up control of most of France's holdings in the Americas without Britain firing a shot. It also led to the fledgling American government being deeply in debt to a British bank. The gold Napoleon got in exchange? He spent it all on preparing an army to invade England, an effort that had to be abandoned. The British were doing some 4D chess here. Username 89054 said. On a similar note, what do Anne Frank, MLK Jr., and Barbara Walters have in common? They were born the same year. Things many view as history were lived experiences by people alive today. The first African-American children to go to desegregated schools in the South are the same age or younger than most Redditors' grandparents. Many of our parents are the same age. Free Reflection 25 said. The guillotine is actually one of the most humane methods of execution. We use the methods we do in the modern day because they look better to the viewers. Lethal injection can cause extreme pain even when done correctly. Gas is also extremely painful and the electric chair is just hell on earth. The most humane way to execute someone is from close range with a large caliber handgun or shotgun to the lower back of the skull. Death is much quicker. Party said. A class of fungus known as mycorrhizae can infect the roots of plants, leaching away the sugars created by the plants, but in return giving them access to more nutrients, as the fungus can spread much further than the roots of the plant. The fungus can actually connect 2 plants together, allowing them to share nutrients and communicate with each other, warning of invading insects or pathogens so the other plants can prepare defenses, for example, in an underground network of sorts. Green Yoshi 89 said. There was a Charo army created here in Mexico to defend the country if the Nazis arrived. Imagine a similar outfit as the one the mariachis have. That's a Charo 100,000 men and horses using guns and machetes. Of course it sounds ridiculous to think that such army could make any harm to Hitler's forces, but the fear at that time was such, that they would have done anything to defend the country. fifiblank said. Have you heard about the Home Guard in Britain? War army uniform, but at least initially armed with agricultural implements and basically consisted of older men and those who were unfit to be soldiers, or in reserve occupations. There is a very popular comedy series about them, but they are quite revered. We are going to have a Home Guard parade in our village this year. I know we were closer to being invaded, but given the US involvement in the war, I get why Mexico also developed its version. I secretly Ebert said. That terror was real and not some bizarre folktale. At the start of the War of the First Coalition, Terror joined the French Revolutionary Army, where even quadruple the standard military ration was unable to satisfy his large appetite. He would eat any available food from gutters and refuse heaps, but his condition still deteriorated through hunger. He was hospitalized due to exhaustion and became the subject of a series of medical experiments to test his eating capacity, in which, among other things, he ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting, ate live cats, snakes, lizards and puppies, and swallowed eels whole without chewing. Despite his unusual diet, he was underweight, and with the exception of his eating habits he showed no signs of mental illness other than what was described as an apathetic temperament. Aaron Gobber said. In 1956, Dr. Robert Brownlee, from Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, was asked to examine whether nuclear detonations could be conducted underground. The first subterranean test was the nuclear device known as Pascal A, which was lowered down a 500-foot, 150 m, borehole. However, the detonated yield turned out to be 50,000 times greater than anticipated, creating a jet of fire that shot hundreds of feet into the sky. During the Pascal B nuclear test of August 1957, a 900-kilogram, 2,000 lb, steel plate cap, a piece of armor plate, was welded over the borehole to contain the nuclear blast, even though Brownlee predicted it would not work. When Pascal B was detonated, the blast went straight up the test shaft, launching the cap into the atmosphere at a speed of more than 66 km/s, 41 ms, 240,000 km per hour, 150,000 mph. The plate was never found. Scientists believe compression heating caused the cap to vaporize as it sped through the atmosphere. A high-speed camera, which took 1 frame per millisecond, was focused on the borehole because studying the velocity of the plate was deemed scientifically interesting. After the detonation, the plate appeared in only 1 frame, but this was enough to make an estimation of its speed. Dr. Brownlee joked the best estimate of the cover's speed from the photographic evidence was it was going like a bat. Brownlee estimated that the explosion, combined with the specific design of the shaft, could accelerate the plate to approximately 6 times Earth's escape velocity. In 2015, Dr. Brownlee said, "I have no idea what happened to the cap, but I always assumed that it was probably vaporized before it went into space." Later calculations made during 2019, although with unconfirmed veracity, on the question of the survivability of the cap necessary to reach outer space are strongly in favor of its vaporization. Aaron Gobber said. Emphasis mine, source. There exists an urban legend surrounding Operation Plum Bob, specifically Pascal B, which usually, albeit erroneously, refers to the borehole cover as a hubcap, a manhole cover, or something of that nature, and typically claiming as well, again, incorrectly, that it in its entirety, or some still recognizable portion of it, successfully escaped Earth's atmosphere followed by the rest of the solar system and so reached interstellar space. In reality, an entire ton of tank armor ascended at a rate of 41 miles per second, and then literally ceased to exist. The end. Fubo said. Plumber's Daughters of Reddit, what's the sexiest lie anyone's ever told you about weird food from your country? Edited to add, and how much did Karen freak out about it? Edited again, oh, and while we're at it, if you woke up and your squishy bits were suddenly stiffy bits, or vice versa, who would you fuck first? Giorgio 1118 said. Bamboo is a grass. Echidna has 4-headed penis. Peanuts are legumes, beans. Some carnivorous plants are sticky enough to trap birds, not the monkey cups in jungles. I'm talking about mats of sticky leaves strong enough to keep birds from flying away. Some people do not react with poison ivy, poison oak, or poison sumac. Giant kelp can grow up to 2 feet a day under the right conditions. Giant redwood and sequoia trees' branches get thicker as you go up, allowing for unique ecosystems to develop at their canopies. Pineapple is a kind of bromeliad. Strangler figs literally choke other trees by squeezing their trunks until they die. Some plants have no chlorophyll and get nutrients by parasitizing other plants. There is no agreed-upon botanical definition of tree. Edits, fixed the tree thing and cleared up the oak and sumac. Thank you to those that brought those to my attention. Adventurous Ad 9531 said. Australia had a prime minister that went swimming in the ocean and then just disappeared. We still don't know what actually happened to him. Also, we lost a war against emus. And there's an unconfirmed rumor I think that our current Prime Minister took a poo in a McDonald's. Edit. I should have been a bit clearer about this. He did a poo in his pants while he was still wearing them. We have a weird history. Denselikeets 1999 said, "Your brain predicts what you are about to experience before you actually experience it, by an infinitesimal amount of time. Our vision, in fact, runs 100 milliseconds behind the real world, so our evolution has adapted our brain to predict what is about to happen before we actually see it happen, and it is usually right, but not always. Hence, our entire reality that we experience is actually a story that our brain creates of the real world, and not in fact an experience of the real world." Weird neuroscience stuff. Regulus Smotman said, "This is why in medicine, there are 4 terms for accuracy: specificity, sensitivity, positive predictive value, and negative predictive value. Specificity is the number of true negative over all actual negative samples. Sensitivity is the number of true positive over actual positive samples. Positive predictive value is the number of true positive over all positive results. Negative predictive value is the number of true negative over all negative results. Doctors would, or at least in theory should, consider all these numbers for the test they are going, as well as considering the actual incidence numbers in the population before making their diagnosis, on top of the physical and historical examinations they take." The figure 13 said, "I have 2. Cleopatra vitae. The Cleopatra was born closer to the invention of the iPhone than to the construction of the Great Pyramids. Mansa Musa of Mali was the wealthiest man in human history. He was so rich, when he went on a pilgrimage to Mecca, he spent so much gold on the way there he actually caused rapid hyperinflation of basic goods because he devalued gold so severely. He actually had to buy the gold back at an increased rate in order to stabilize the entire regional economy." Spiritual Jaguar 4685 said, "Methane is a naturally occurring chemical, but it follows a very predictable chemistry. Long story short, it naturally breaks down over time into smaller compounds at a very predictable rate. So you'd expect a planet, on its own, to have X amount of methane, but also find predictable amounts of the Y and Z compounds it breaks down into. Cows single-handedly fart and burp out such unbelievable massive amounts of methane every day that it would be obvious to anyone looking at Earth that there is way too much methane for it to be naturally occurring. It would have to be being actively produced by a living organism." Squirrel Bear said, "I've been watching YouTube pilots and airplane crash videos a lot recently. The passenger air mask's air is produced chemically. The process starts when you rip the mask down. It lasts around 20 minutes. Pilots have tight gas masks. There are multiple carryable oxygen tanks in airplane for passengers who need more oxygen, or if the oxygen runs out. The air is meant for rapid depressurization, when there's a hole in airplane in higher altitudes. You can breathe air in lower altitudes, even while the airplane is up. The air is meant for the time when plane descends to safer altitudes. Safest place in airplane is in the back of the plane. If the airplane crashes on water, it'll be in million pieces. You always want to hope that the pilot lands on land, even it meant the plane collides to trees and forest." Edit. If the plane is about to crash, the pilot might not make any announcement, or it might come few seconds before impact. Cirker said, "There are stories that they weren't, which are often regarded as myths. But they are also known to have some kind of passed on culture and heavily suspected to have a complex language. Maybe they did try to attack us at some point in time and paid badly. Now, don't ever fuck with those. We did once and they came back and killed almost our whole family. But they have a weakness: be cute and cuddly, and they will even protect you. That said, around the coast of Spain there is a group which currently attacks sailboats, like ripping the rudder off and then trying to capsize them. So maybe, fuck it. They are stealing our food, putting poison in the water and making way too much noise. We don't care anymore. If we have to go, let's make it worth it. I really like them, still. Beautiful, fascinating animals." Chuckles 1188 said, "A friend of mine recently had an ectopic pregnancy which ruptured. She is fine now, and as a result they had to remove her fallopian tube. She was annoyed about this because she thought it meant she only had one functioning ovary, but she was told that this is not the case. Fallopian tubes can actually move around and provide access to the uterus to either ovary. They have a favorite, but some people with only one fallopian tube do get pregnant via an ovum released from the wrong ovary." Labralite said. There's a family of birds where males spend their entire lives practicing insanely intricate courting dances. Just ridiculously complicated. Swan Lake level complicated. They're called birds of paradise, and they've faced pretty much no predation or outside environmental pressures for the majority of their existence. Basically their every need has been taken care of. So, the females have been the ones to instill the evolutionary pressure. They still wanted to be selective in choosing their mate in order to raise the best possible offspring, and the males still wanted to show they were worthy, so they kinda made up their own standards that somehow ended up building up into just a huge complicated mess. One of my favorites is a bird that has a chosen dance floor on the forest floor that it cleans every day. It moves all the leaves and sticks and shit that fell the night before until it's just bare dirt, and it practices its moves all day every day until a female comes along. Then it proceeds through a courting dance with 4 distinct parts in a very exact order, each part having a complex series of movements. These dances can last anywhere from 20 minutes to hours on end. And the majority of the time the female doesn't even stay for the whole thing. When they do succeed, it's a 10-second tops insemination and the female's on her way. And then the male just goes back to practicing for the next female. Just insane. Kiratakin said the single deadliest man in history wasn't Stalin, or Hitler, or some dictator, but a mild-mannered chemist with over 100 patents named Dr. Thomas Midgley. He invented a new method for mass-producing leaded, no-knock, gasoline, leading to widespread adoption, and later invented CFC refrigerants. Ironically, he was poisoned by lead due to working around it so much, leading to him later becoming an invalid. He built an elaborate series of pulleys to get out of bed, which led to his death when he became tangled in them and strangled to death. Was by all accounts a stand-up guy, but was responsible to 2 of the worst chemical disasters in human history, causing the premature deaths of literally hundreds of millions, and died by his own hand. Dynasty 2201 said, the notion recommendation that you don't drink while on antibiotics is nonsense for almost all antibiotics. Granted, there are half a dozen or so where alcohol will affect you while on that antibiotics, but the rest? It's just an old saying and is completely untrue. The actual reason for not drinking while on antibiotics was because they were used to treat syphilis, an STD. So, those that had syphilis were told not to drink during the treatment period, not because it was affect them in any way if they did, but because they'd get drunk and go off and have sex and spread the syphilis. Aquarius Blueberry said, samurai were officially abolished in Japan in 1867. The first ever fax machine was invented in 1843. Abraham Lincoln died in 1865. So, there was a 22-year window where the samurai technically could have sent a fax to Lin. Also, when doctors finish surgery they put the organs back in your body and your organs just automatically know where to go from like a muscle memory type of thing and wriggle back to the correct spot. Rangilaris00L said, that's not a fact, because there are several varieties of bananas available in India that are different than some wild species and not the popular Cavendish variety. Here is the Sunkaliaka Elachi banana is a variety. It's harder, sweeter, less flavorful, smaller in size, slightly longer than your index finger, sometimes contains seeds. Blue banana, red banana, wild banana, etc. I have eaten them all, and they are not the typical tissue culture clones of Cavendish you are referring to. Doc19 said, pulled from a sauce video. The amount of ways a deck of cards can be arranged is 8x1067, which is 8 with 67 zeros behind it. To put that in perspective, set a timer for 8x1067 seconds. Now stand on the equator. After 1 billion years pass, take 1 step forward, then wait another billion years. Continue this process until you make it all the way around the world. After you circle the globe, take a single droplet of water out of the Pacific Ocean. Then, start walking again. Continue this process until the Pacific Ocean is empty of water. Once the Pacific is dry, place 1 piece of paper on the ground. Then restart the whole process before placing another piece of paper on top of the first. Continue this process until the stack of paper reaches the Sunday. Once you make it to the sun, the timer will still be at 8x1067 seconds. Link to the video, https://youtube.be/abicjzfyacm. Ugalugalagaloo said, in the US, You are 12.5x times more likely to die at a doctor's hand through medical malpractice than be murdered by someone with a gun. This assuming 20k murders a year, which is 2020's number, and is abnormally high. It's typically closer to 10-11k. Annual medical malpractice deaths are around 250k, per the CDC. If you are in the US and you are not a violent criminal or a gang member, you are 62.5x times more likely to die in medical malpractice than by gunshot. According to the CDC, the average number of gun murders that are gang-on-gang related is 80%. Going to the doctor in the US is a much greater threat to your life than any gun violence could ever hope to be. Heck, statistically speaking, a cheeseburger kills way more Americans per year than all weapons and violence combined. Maximus 420 said, "Your feet are very slightly younger than your head. Time moves slower around massive gravitation bodies. This is often illustrated in the example of a slight time offset inherent in GPS satellites to maintain accuracy because their clocks in orbit are running at a faster rate, like 1/1,000,000th of a second or something, but it's enough to throw them off by several miles per day if not corrected for. The same is true, albeit to an even smaller margin, to your own body." Krodisk said, "Einstein taught us that mass and energy are the exact same thing, just in different forms. Now if you take an iron spring for example and you push it together with a screw clamp so that it is under constant tension, you basically apply energy to the system, which means that the iron spring and the screw clamp have to be more massive than if you just measure their weight individually. Let's say the iron spring has a mass of 1 kilogram and the screw clamp has a mass of 0.5 kilograms. If you put them together and force the spring to be under constant tension, the combined system has to be more massive than 1.5 kilograms. To be fair, the added mass is extremely tiny, but it is there, it is true and measurable. The next mind-blowing thing Einstein taught us is that time and space are one thing. If you move more distance in space, you can't be moving through time so much, and if you move through time out, you can't make out of distance in space. In other words, if you are fast, your wristwatch will tick slower than if you are slow. This is important for navigation satellites, for example, because of the fact that they travel at a speed of 14,000 kilometers per hour. Their clock will go slower a couple milliseconds every day." Krodisk said, "If you don't count that in, our navigation systems would be extremely inaccurate. Instead of up to 10 kilometers, they just have a couple of meters inaccuracy every day. Einstein has given us the necessary tools to predict that two neutron stars, with each one having the mass of our sun while just being 16 kilometers in diameter, both of those doing several full rotations in a second while they are spiraling around each other, being about 1,000,000 kilometers apart, they will approach each other 7 millimeters every day. He knew that 100 years ago, which is absolutely insane. People can use their intelligence to accomplish crazy things, and most of us are not even aware of the things we could do as the most intelligent species on this planet. Our brain is the most effective tool we have, and some people refuse to use it. That makes me sad." General Kenobi said, "A decent portion of Americans still thinks capitalism is working for people, and not just the ultra-rich and people born with advantages. Crazy, right? Another crazy fact, most people in the US don't know what communism or socialism is, and yet still bitch about while at the same time describing capitalism in their criticisms. There's a reason younger people are getting sick of the bullshit. Working 3 jobs to afford an apartment while paying off massive amounts of hospital debt and trying to pay for college. Eat shit.